And I think our next guest might have some comments on our Prime Minister's comments on the US, for example. Let's see what happens. She has served in the White House as the first United States Deputy Chief Technology Officer, and she led the White House Open Government Initiative. And also UK Prime Minister David Cameron appointed her Senior Advisor for Open Government, and she also served on the Obama-Biden transition team. Please welcome Professor Beth Simone Noveck.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And it's an honor to be here. And thank you to Prime Minister Stubb. Thank you to Open Finland and to Sitra for the invitation, and to our moderators, Anna and the CCOSD. I've lost her. It sounds like a government acronym practically, or a government agency. So I'm very delighted to be here. Of course, Finland is one of the great homes of openness, having a long-standing tradition of 250 years plus of the principle of open government, or at least of good government, and a long-standing practice, of course, of keeping very detailed census records and church records of its citizenry. There's this long-standing tradition on which we can build here. A tradition that I might add has as its centerpiece the notion of keeping government accountable. That's the idea of open in this case. Good government is about holding government to account, limiting corruption, and increasing the effectiveness of government. And it has at its center the conception of citizens as the monitor of government, the watcher. I would argue that in the transition, let's do that again. In the transition from this conception of good government to now the notion of open government, we're really doing a radical re-envisioning of our conception of citizenship. We're taking ourselves out of the world of citizen as watcher, the citizens whose sole capability is to elect wise leaders, like Prime Minister Stubb, of course, and thankfully we are good at that as well, but we can do more. There is an active conception of citizenship at the root of open government. And so it was not without controversy when in 2009 in the United States we adopted the directive on open government, and we charged our federal agencies, our ministries, not simply to open up data about the workings of government, about how they spend money, but to also open up what we termed high-value data, an ambiguous term. It had a poor definition. We weren't quite sure what it meant. We couldn't have gotten up here in the way that you did and given a concise definition. But we knew that we could do something more. We knew that we could do something more about opening up government information because, in fact, the information that government collects is owned by the taxpayer because we pay for it, we pay for that collection, but also because it's ours. In particular, the information that is personal to us, that are our records, are owned by us as a philosophical and ethical matter, but also for the instrumental reason, and all these booths out here attest to this today, that when you let other people get their hands on the data, they can do so much more with it than government can do by itself and on its own. So as we think about what it means to be open, I like the phrase that Finland has adopted of not only open, but fair and confident. And it is confidence that is at the root, I think, of this agenda. So open government, open data, and I'm glad to hear all of these are going to be covered over the next 2 days, and I'm going to mix them somewhat freely, includes not only the data that government holds and collects about us and about the companies that it regulates, it includes also open science data, these collections of open and common information that are created not only by nonprofit and academic activities, but by companies like Ubiome, a company started by a former student of mine, where people are sharing their own biosamples in order to create a common and shared resource for genetic research. But it's also about the data that companies can and should and hopefully will be sharing more, a term that has now come to be known in some circles as corporate data or open data philanthropy, is the data that companies can contribute to this effort as well. So how do we go from the principle of open government, of good government, to realizing social impact? I would say there are 7 steps that we have to take along this pathway, and we have to do all of them. We have to invest in all of them. It's partly about the pronouncements It's partly about President Obama getting up on his first day in office, or sitting down in this case, and signing as his first executive action a memorandum on transparency and open government. It's about Prime Minister Cameron sending a letter to all federal agencies announcing the release of open data, including spending data. It's about the G8 convening last year and enacting a charter on open corporate data. It's about having the Prime Minister of Finland here at a conference about open data. This is a super geeky event. And to have the Prime Minister of the country here attests a great deal and sends a very, very important signal and symbolic message. These words really matter, and they matter to set the stage correctly for moving forward on this initiative. But at the same time, we also need the policies. We need the laws. We need the things that help us translate from the grand principles and big ideas into practice, so that those civil servants and those bureaucrats know what to do when given the edict of open data. What does that mean in terms of the day-to-day job? And so that there's also some accountability when people fail to open up the data that has been promised. But neither the pronouncements nor the policies go far enough. We need the practical strategies for translating the ideal of open into real practice, a place where people can go to search for and find the data, a place where government agencies and companies and others can put the data. This is why the creation of open data portals, opendata.gov, data.gov.uk, .fi, are so really crucial to making this movement real in practice, not only in principle. But we also need the strategies that are bottom-up as well as those that are top-down. We have the pronouncements, we have the policies, we can create the platforms, but we need the movement behind it. We need the Open Data Initiative coming out of the UK with its many subsidiaries around the world, the Open Knowledge Foundation, which has a branch here in Finland as well. We need groups like this, the Apps for Finland group, and others who are pushing and pushing and pushing and demanding open data and saying, we are here, and if you give us the data, we will use it. We're interested in it. These groups are coming not only out of the civil society world, but they're also coming out of the academic community. They're groups like RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic in the United States, which has developed the catalog, the international catalog of all the catalogs of open data, and that's helping to spur academic research and the community of people interested academically, as well as people in the business community, as well as then the world of hackathons and CSOs that are getting together. The myriad organizations that are now helping to build this ecosystem and begin to make open data a reality. If we want to actually live by the mantra of open data and experience true institutional transformation, we need to do all of these things. And I want to do a quick sort of interlude for a moment to talk about some of the reasons that have already been cited and that will undoubtedly be talked about a great deal over the next few days. Obviously, open data is rooted in that good government notion of accountability, right? So it's not necessarily a new concept or a high-tech concept. MKSS in the state of Rajasthan in India is painting budgets on the walls of villages and inviting villagers to scrutinize the regional budgets to find payments that have been made to someone has died, the bridge that's been built to nowhere. It's the notion that we can hold government accountable when we create greater openness by putting up sites like USA Spending or the Coins database in the US that allow us to better scrutinize what government is doing. I would argue that making available also the data that would allow us to create greater corporate accountability is an important next step in this process. We are fighting in the United States now for greater access, for example, to the tax returns of nonprofit corporations, the so-called 990s, which are already legally required to be made available. We're fighting for greater electronic access to those records so that we can know who are the nonprofits that serve our communities, where the gaps are in the social services they provide, where the fraud and corruption is, etc. And there's more to be done on the corporate side as well, which I'll say a bit more about. Obviously, open data can also help with efficiency. It can help, as has been the case in the UK, where Mastodon C and the Open Healthcare Initiative in the UK, incubated by the Open Data Initiative, who worked with the journalist and doctor Ben Goldacre to actually scrutinize data, comparative data sets about prescription habits, the various sort of regional differences in the prescription of statins versus generic versus patented statins, to uncover the wild variations in regional spending practices and uncover the potential for £200 million of savings. McKinsey, in its recent work, has said that using open data can assist patients with chronic conditions with better drug adherence, thereby potentially saving hundreds of billions of dollars. And our health ministry in the United States is, of course, using open data to try to increase efficiency and decrease fraud, waste, and abuse. It's really, really useful for allowing us to spot problems. This is, of course, what we can do so well with big data, right? We can find those patterns that we can't see with the naked eye when we can, in fact, use the high computational power available to us to look at large data. But it's only if that data is open as a matter of policy and a matter of law that we can take advantage of what big data can give us. So in New York City, of course, the Geek Squad, as it's come to be known, the department of the government that's charged with looking at data and trying to infuse better data governance, is looking at myriad data sources from around the municipality and trying to track new ways of using data to spot problems, in particular noise, pollution, and other kinds of public health risks that might be spotted quickly as a way to identify where to target resources, the few resources the city has to put into enforcement to be able to target better. So for example, I just came across this the other day. It turns out that in New York City, whereas you might think that the people checking into hospitals are most likely to suffer from heart attacks or from cancer or the many diseases that challenge us in a highly obese nation, in fact, oddly, the data shows that the number one cause of emergency room visits relates to infectious diseases. Worth probing a bit further, but it's helping us by using data and open data in particular to spot problems. The state and city of Washington, D.C. is using open data as a mechanism also to track the performance of government agencies and to share them with the public and combine it with social media data to do sentiment analysis, to understand better what people feel and think about the government and how they can improve the way the agencies are functioning. They use this system in order to give the agencies grades and to track their improvement and to improve service delivery to people. We're seeing the use of these kinds of tools, of course, in a wide variety of contexts. So the Durkheim Project is trying to analyze social media data to detect early signs of suicide risk among veterans coming back from the wars. Or Marist College, which is using predictive modeling to identify students at risk of dropping out. New York State, as similarly as many others, are using this kind of predictive modeling to also identify people who are at risk of returning to the hospital and of readmission in order to and spot those people early and do early intervention with them. So there are lots of ways in which we are using data, open data, to help us to spot problems. But the important thing is, of course, the way that we're using open data, not just to spot those problems, to find out where the noise and the pollution is in the cities, but to solve those problems. It's helping to open up a whole new world of consumer choice, of tools in which consumers are better able to make decisions, such as the Good Guide out of the UK, which uses 1,500 open public data sets to offer consumers and companies a choice between different products. People who want to make a choice between products that actually have a social mission, that have better environmental impact or better health impacts. O-Power, for example, is using open data from the Energy Ministry combined with other sorts of public data to give people more personalized advice about how to reduce their energy consumption and save money. Transportation is also a sector that's, of course, been markedly affected by open data. It's not just the apps that allow us to tell us when our bus is coming or when our subway is coming, which are already such a wonderful advance over the way the world was before. But the availability of geospatial data sets and weather data sets are allowing companies like INRIX to do better traffic modeling and companies like Keychain to now serve as a broker between truckers who own their own trucks and companies wanting to ship something. They're sort of the Uber for the commercial trucking industry, allowing people to do business in new ways. Healthcare is probably the sector that's experiencing, at least in the United States and in the UK, the greatest transformation as a result of open data. We, of course, have a model in the US where we have been paying huge amounts of money to pay for the services performed rather than the results achieved as a result of our healthcare system. As a result, our population is getting sicker and sicker, and the cost is getting higher and higher. We need a large-scale transformation that is allowing us to pay for wellness rather than pay for services. And we're doing that as a result of open data in large part. Just to take one example, Aiden is a recent company that has been started to built exclusively using open data from our health ministry to enable hospital administrators to help make better decisions about people's care after they check out of the hospital, post-acute care. So families and patients and administrators are saving a great deal of time, lowering the risk of readmission, and helping to choose a better facility for acute care patients, improving ultimately their wellness, not only increasing efficiency. Aiden is one example of myriad new companies that are starting as a result of open data. I'm sure the hall out there is filled with them. People who are creating new products, new services, and new businesses that didn't exist before. Companies like Noveck, which gives loans to small and medium-sized enterprises, is using open data sets to create an automated way of going beyond the credit score, of doing quick, essentially financial risk analysis of small or medium-sized enterprises, using data from our Small Business Administration and our Commerce Department and other places to help them give loans to small and medium-sized enterprises. They are themselves an entrepreneurial business who are in turn helping to support new kinds of entrepreneurial businesses as a result of their work. There are lots and lots of industries that are at risk of getting disrupted because of open data. One of those is government itself. This is an example of the visualization from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which has, over the last few years, opened up the entire corpus of patent office data. And as a result of which, one of the things they've been able to do is to visualize their own performance. How long does it take them to receive a patent application, to process it, to get back to an inventor, which inventions are getting patents and which are not? And they have a visualization for themselves of those wait times, which are steadily declining as a result of open data. But those effects are not limited to government. In fact, we are just beginning to realize how to use open data to improve how government itself works. Across industry, there are these transformations. So you have a business like Climate Corporation, recently purchased by Monsanto, which relies on open data in order to give farmers and those in agricultural businesses better insight into weather and crop patterns and better ways of planning their own farming activities. And in turn, what they're doing with it is using it as a tool to offer insurance policies in the agricultural sector. This business couldn't have existed a few years ago. There is obviously tremendous economic potential. McKinsey, as is its wont, consulting firms like to do this, estimates how many? $3 trillion of savings as a result of, $3 trillion of value, created by open government data. Which is whatever you think about the merits of that number. If it's too big, it's too small. There is surely the opportunity here to realize economic growth, the creation of new jobs, etc. But there's also tremendous social and democratic benefit. Ultimately, what open data really helps us to do is to collaborate with one another. So in the Fire Department app, which has since been renamed, it's no longer called the Fire Department app, it's now called PulsePoint. What open data streams from our emergency services enable people to register to become a first responder. So that this is the map of California and the fire departments and police departments, those able to provide emergency services before Pulse Point. Now, thanks to an open data stream and an app that lets me get a notification when somebody nearby is having a heart attack, this is the map of first responders in California. It's government complemented by citizens working in new ways collaboratively as a result of open data to save and improve people's lives. We're trying to get a bit of a handle of this on the project we're doing at the GovLab called the Open Data 500, where we're trying to understand who the companies are and what the services are that are being delivered as a result of open data. Because there are a lot of challenges to really realizing this societal impact and value. And I want to just mention a few of these challenges as I close out my talk. One, of course, is privacy, and I think we'll hear a lot about this in a moment. But the challenge to actually protect people's personally identifiable information at the same time as we think about how to open up public data sets is very challenging. Not only the accidental release of Social Security and related national ID numbers that may be in a data set, but what can happen when you triangulate data sets to reveal somebody's personal identity. There's the challenge of the cost. It's already costly to put raw data up, but is it enough? Open Corporates itself is a wonderful new NGO and small company. They do both a for-profit and a non-profit that's providing raw data about companies, but it's raw data, and it's very hard to make sense of it. Do we have to really invest in, and that's costly and difficult to do, key visualizations like this one created by Living Cities and CartoDB? CartoDB, which just got $7 million of investment because it's expensive to create these kinds of visualizations. And finally, I think the biggest challenge that we will have in the next few years is moving from a faith and a belief in open data, which we need to do this work now, to an evidence-based proof that it actually has a transformational impact on people's lives. Coming to Finland, I couldn't help but think of this quote from the book To Finland Station, which, as you know, was written by Edmund Wilson long ago, before he understood fully the negative impact of communism and of Lenin and of Stalin's legacies. Nabokov, in his commentary to Wilson, said, yeah, Lenin, not so great as you thought. He's the pail of milk of human kindness with the dead rat at the bottom. The point being, will open data turn out to have the potential? Will it turn out to have the positive impact that we're hoping it will? The National Health Service in Britain is banking on the fact that it will do all of these things. Open data will lead to greater accountability and efficiency and choice and economic growth. It'll practically, vacuum it'll hoover your living room and do the dishes for you, is what open data will do. But proving it has been very slow to come. In fact, they're beleaguered and plagued by challenges to privacy and accidental release of personal information that are making the pathway to proving this very difficult. So we have to do a lot, and there are groups out there trying to do this to really understand what works to improve real people's lives. Last thing, there are a few things, I think, some concrete takeaways of things we can do if we want to realize this vision of an open data society and an open data government. First, we have a lot of work to do to help us understand and visualize not just government data, but corporate data, and the data that government holds about the companies that it regulates, so that we can create a map, which we don't have today, of who the companies are in our society. We have the opportunity, as Chicago is doing with its Windy City Dashboard project, to govern better using open data. Not just to put out data, but to bring it back into government, to understand what are the traffic patterns, where are the taxis going, where are people going, where are the health risks. If we don't re-internalize it to govern differently, what's the value? There's another opportunity, which is not just to push data out to people and make it transparent, but to use citizens as active citizens to bring data back in, sometimes referred to as the citizen science movement. Getting people to sample their air quality, sample their water quality, as they're doing in Japan, getting them to use Geiger counters to take radiation levels and contribute back to the storehouse of data is extremely important. We must recognize, too, that data is not just numbers and statistics. It includes laws, it includes policies, it includes, in this case, the actions of government itself, which when released as an open government data set, we were able to transform from a boring legal PDF that no one read into a magazine that now thousands and tens of thousands of people read more. We have to keep remembering that open data is ultimately not about the data release, it's about the collaboration that it engenders. Without that collaboration, we will not realize the value. So we got to encourage it. Tax credits for open data release and corporate data philanthropy, more training for everyone, for graduate and undergraduate students, for civil servants. We need to know not just how to use new dialogue methods, as the Finnish Open Government Plan calls for, but how to use data to govern in new ways. We're going to have to experiment. We're going to have to figure out, maybe do some A/B testing to release something with an open data and this not with open data, see what the difference is. We're going to have to test different licenses, open licenses, closed licenses, to figure out what the best way is to release the data. And we're finally going to have to really encourage people to do all of these things if we're going to move from this faith-based world where we live today. Believe me, I'd rather be in this faith-based world where there's 700 of us sitting across 3 rooms to talk about open data than where we were 5 years ago. But where we need to be 5 years from now is a world where there is evidence of actual impact, that this is leading to real improvements in real people's lives. We have to work together, therefore, to set up an open data learning infrastructure, an open data learning environment, where we're actually doing research about the impact, where we're setting up metrics, where we're engaging the public in defining and articulating what those metrics are, where we're creating an expert network of people who've worked with open data. Have you set up an open data portal? Have you written an open data law? Has this person here had disastrous failure in creating an open data business? We need to know what those experiences are, and we need to be sharing them with each other and talking to each other if we're to spread the cultural meme. So let me close with that, and to just remind us that our goal in doing all of this is real people's lives. That what we're trying to do is to save lives, we're trying to improve social well-being, we're trying to enhance the quality of our environment and our society and our culture with and through open data. It is a powerful demonstration when government puts out a data set and geeks come to hack with it, and we build apps with it, and journalists create new visualizations, and there's a demand for it. It is a powerful visualization that citizens can do more than monitor their government. They are active and engaged participants in their democracy. And if we ask people to participate, they will. Open data is the means to get us there. Thank you.